Hello. You may be wondering, why am I making a video about a team that only went 9-5 and missed the playoffs? To be quite frank, it's because I love Bob Lee.
EABeatsProductions.com.
Anyways, by the early 1970s, the Atlanta Falcons had still not yet reached the playoffs at any point in their history ever since becoming a franchise in 1966. And in 1972, quarterback Bob Berry had statistically the best quarterback season in Falcons history, but he still went 7-7 and he ended up getting traded away to Minnesota in the offseason. But in the trade from Minnesota, the Falcons gave up a first round pick, Bob Berry, and in return they got linebacker Lonnie Warwick, who's my GOAT, 69 Vikings, and then also Bob Lee. But besides Bob Lee and Lonnie Warwick, they also picked up quarterback Dick Shiner. Yeah, that's his name. Anyways, week 1 at New Orleans. Oh my goodness. Dick Shiner freaking popped off for his best game ever in his legendary career. No worries. I love you, Dick Shiner. Archie Manning got freaking killed. He didn't get anything done. Oh my goodness. And his backup, whatever his name was, he didn't even do much better. And the defense just completely killed the freaking Saints. Wide receiver Ken Burrow, no relation to Joe Burrow, not to be mistaken with Ken Burrow of the Oilers, scored 2 touchdowns on 3 receptions for 60 yards. And if the offense could just keep up half of this production, I mean, just 62 points. I mean, how better could it get? Oh boy. Dick Shiner in the offense only managed 83 total yards, and Rams quarterback John Hadle of the Chargers, carved up the defense, and things just did not get better in the next following weeks. And oh boy. Against Detroit, the offense only managed 2 field goals and got blown out despite Greg Landry literally doing nothing. Look at these stats. Anyways, I love you, Greg Landry. And then they lost to the 49ers, and they didn't score a single touchdown. Dick Shiner, after week 1, was so bad, he got benched and eventually let go by the Falcons, and he was sent over to the Patriots and became the greatest Patriots quarterback of all time. Yeah, by week 5, the Falcons fans essentially have just lost hope. I mean, 1 month without scoring a touchdown, that's pretty bad. But Bob Lee was now the starter, and the Chicago Bears came to town, and they opened up quick with a touchdown, and it seemed like it would just be the same old, and losing season. Then, oh my goodness, the Falcons offense woke up finally, and Dave Hampton, he was determined to become Atlanta's first ever 1,000-yard rusher. Bob Lee led not the most spectacular stats. That didn't even make any sense. I don't even know what I said just there. But he was consistent and led the freaking Falcons to 40-plus points, which is quite incredible, especially after what just happened over the last month. And I guess they got back into the winning column. Against the lowly San Diego Chargers, who had ancient Johnny Unitas on their roster. Like, what the heck? That's insane. He should have always been a freaking Colt. Anyways, the passing attack for Atlanta was low-key atrocious, but the defense led by Claude Humphrey, who is one of the most underrated players of all time, shut down the Chargers. And the Falcons runners like Dave Hampton and Art Malone played like crazy to lead Atlanta to another insane blowout victory. Next came the rematch with the 49ers. Bob Lee, a California native, started his first game in his home state, and then he threw 2 touchdown passes to Ken Burrow, who put up an incredible, unbelievable 164-yard performance in 1973. That's modern-day wide receiver numbers. That's like, there's like a random wide receiver. I actually don't know who's a random wide receiver. They're all like big names to me, I guess. Anyways, the Falcons passed by the 49ers 17-3. Next up was a crucial rematch with the Rams. A loss would eliminate the hopes for a division title, and in a hard-hitting defensive struggle, Nick Nickemeyer blasted 5 field goals to help the Falcons escape with the 15-13 win, and playoff hopes remaining alive for the division title. In Week 9, and in control of their own destiny, the Falcons took on the red-hot Philadelphia Eagles and their top-ranked pass attack led by Roman Gabriel and Harold Carmichael. The Falcons opened up the game by fumbling the ball and recovering, and then Bob Lee threw an interception on the next play. Philadelphia capitalized with a touchdown from Roman Gabriel. But Bob Lee let the Falcons down the field. and with some razzle-dazzle to tie the game. And in the second quarter, Lee threw a strike to Ken Burrow, and Philadelphia kicked 2 field goals from my personal favorite kicker, Tom Dempsey. Up 17-13 after the half, Hungarian legend Nick Nickemeyer kicked a field goal, but Philadelphia's Norm Bulash scored, tying the game. Now tied, the Falcons were forced to punt. But punter John James kicked an incredible coffin corner kick, which changed the momentum and put the Philadelphia Eagles all the way at their own 1. And after getting nowhere on their next series, the Eagles had to give up the ball back to Philadelphia. And Lee found Burrow open again for a big gain, and Dave Hampton carved through the Eagle defense, and Atlanta never looked back, pouring it on for the rest of the fourth quarter, winning 44-27. In Week 10, and perhaps the biggest game of the season, the Falcons welcomed the 10-0 Vikings, who were led by freaking Fran Tarkenton and Chuck Foreman, juggernaut of a team. This game was a must-win to keep a pulse in the NFC West with the Rams at 6-2 and the Falcons at 6-3. And to add more pressure, the Falcons quarterback Bob Lee had been the backup in Minnesota from 1969 to 1972. And also, Bob Lee got himself a new nickname, General Lee. Obviously, the nickname General Lee is either referencing the General Lee car, which even that is referencing Robert E. Lee, Confederate. I'm not a big fan of the Confederates, but I'm going to be honest, Bob Lee being named General Lee is kind of cool, so I'm just going to let that slide. I don't care. Yeah. Anyways, Nick Nickemeyer opened up with a field goal, but the Vikings offense responded with a Fran Tarkenton touchdown to John Gilliam to take the lead. But the Falcons kept up with the mighty Vikings, and Bob Lee threw a touchdown pass to Dave Hampton, and another touchdown pass on an incredible scramble and 39-yard pass to Eddie Ray to make it 17-7 at the half. And for the rest of the game, the Atlanta defense kept the Vikings in check to end up with a 20-14 victory against the best team in pro football. And now with 4 games left, the Falcons will need to win out the rest of the season to clinch the NFC West. But winning 3 would still give them a playoff spot and the first ever postseason appearance in Falcons history. In Week 11 at Chase Stadium, along with muddy conditions, there was also a shaggy-haired quarterback named Joe Namath. But Joe's cannon arm and gimpy knees were no help against one of the top defenses in the NFL. But still, the game was competitive, and Bob Lee threw touchdown passes to backup receivers as Ken Burrow and Al Dodd stayed sidelined with injuries. But still, the Falcons won 28-20. Now with 3 games left, all the Falcons need to do is win 2 more and they're in the playoffs. Win 3, they clinch the division. Okay, Week 12 against non-controversial running back O.J. Simpson, the Falcons utterly and completely stunk up the joint. The Falcons' offense scored 0 touchdowns, Bob Lee got sacked 4 times, and hopes for winning the NFC West was gone. There was no winning it. The Rams were powerhouses. They were not going to lose for the rest of their season. So yeah, there was no hopes of hoping to win the division. But if they just won the next 2 games against the Cardinals, who didn't even have starter Jim Hart and had a rookie head coach, Don Coryell, and they were 3-8-1. If they could beat them and then the Saints, who they already beat, I stuttered. I don't care. They just have to win 2 more games and lose none. And they're in the... Okay, Oh, no! Okay, after taking a 10-0 lead, it seemed like they're going to be on the road to the playoffs, but shortly after taking the 10-0 lead, the Cardinals' defense just completely shut down Bob Lee. Bob Lee got sacked 4 times, threw 0 touchdowns. Cardinals legend Jim Bakken kicked 6 freaking field goals to win 32-10. And also, I'm gonna quickly add, Bob Lee completed 5 passes and 2 of them were interceptions. Oh my goodness. And that was it. They were done. Their playoff hopes were done. 2 games they should have won, and they just blew it. And speaking of blowing it, against the Saints in the last week, Dave Hampton needed 87 yards to reach 1,000 yards, and he only got 84, and he missed out by 6 yards. And with that, the 1973 season ended on a bittersweet ending. Quickly, I want to mention many of the defensive players I didn't mention, mainly due to the lack of footage and stats for defensive players from the time. I like to give a shout out to defensive back Ray Brown, who pulled in 6 interceptions. defensive end John Zook, who made the Pro Bowl, cornerback Tom Hayes, who had 4 interceptions and returned 2 of them for touchdowns, and Greg Brzezina, who was a great hard-hitting linebacker who intercepted 3 passes. These men, along with many others, helped Atlanta become a top 10 defense in the NFL for 1973. And it seemed like the future for Atlanta would be bright and full of potential, but sadly, in 1974, the team regressed and went 3-11. Bob Lee was not the long-term answer at quarterback, and Norm Van Brocklin, the coach, got fired halfway through the season. And yet again, Dave Hampton missed out on the 1,000-yard mark, and it would take him until 1975 to finally hit 1,000 yards for Atlanta. Atlanta missed out on their first playoff berth in 73, but they still had their best year ever to that point with a 9-5 record. And to many, that will seem unimpressive and lame, but to me, and to those Falcons fans at the time, it certainly was a year to remember.